I bought a small house by the sea to enjoy my retirement in peace. One afternoon, my daughter called me and said, "Mom, I need you to stay in the shed for a few days. We're going to use the house for a party with my friends. If you embarrass me, I'll send you to a nursing home." I laughed and said nothing, but I did do something. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The phone rang while I was replacing the curtain rod in the upstairs bedroom. My hands were dusty with plaster, my knees aching from standing on the stepladder for too long. I'd turned 66 3 weeks earlier, alone, with a slice of grocery store cake and a cup of chamomile tea. No one had called that day either. "Mom?" Megan's voice came through sharp and hurried, the way it always did when she wanted something. "I need the house." I climbed down carefully, steadying myself against the wall. Through the window, I could see the ocean stretching flat and gray under the afternoon clouds. The gulls were circling low, their cries piercing through the glass. This house, my house, sat at the edge of Cedar Point, Massachusetts, where the old fishing warehouses had been converted into narrow, salt-weathered homes. I'd bought it with every penny of my teacher's pension and the savings I'd squirreled away over 40 years of careful living. It wasn't grand. The stone walls held dampness, and the pipes groaned when the temperature dropped. But it was mine. "What do you mean you need the house?" I asked, pressing the phone to my ear with my shoulder while I gathered the tools scattered across the floor. "For the launch party, my new consulting firm. I told you about it, didn't I?" She didn't wait for my answer. "We're doing the official opening event next Saturday. Clients, investors, local business people. It's a big deal, Mom. And your place is perfect. That whole seafront thing. Very authentic. Very New England. People will love it." I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever Megan called with plans that involved me but weren't really about me. "Megan, I live here. This isn't a venue. I know that," she said, her tone sharpening. "That's why I'm calling ahead. You can stay in the shed for a few days. The annex, I mean. It's got heat now, right? You fixed it up last summer." The shed. She meant the small storage building attached to the back of the house, where I kept gardening tools, old paint cans, and boxes of books I hadn't unpacked yet. I'd added a space heater and a cot this past summer when my neighbor's grandson needed a place to crash for a weekend, but it was hardly habitable for more than a night or two. "Megan, that's not— Mom, please." Her voice dropped into that pleading register she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "Don't make this difficult. This is important for my career. You know how hard I've worked to get this off the ground. And it's just a few days. You can come back after the weekend." I looked around the bedroom. I'd spent 2 months stripping the old wallpaper, painting the walls a soft cream color, finding the vintage brass lamp at an estate sale. Every corner of this house carried my effort, my vision. I'd moved here 8 months ago, after selling the cramped apartment in Worcester where I'd lived for 30 years, where every surface reminded me of the life I'd built, and then watched crumble when my husband left me for his dental hygienist. That apartment had become a mausoleum of disappointment. This house was supposed to be my resurrection. "What if I say no?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. Then Megan's voice came back harder, colder. "Mom, I'm not asking you to move out permanently. I'm asking for 1 weekend. But if you're going to be difficult about this, if you're going to embarrass me in front of my colleagues and clients, then maybe we need to have a different conversation about whether this house is really the best place for you, whether you're managing okay out here alone." The threat hung in the air between us, unspoken but clear. The nursing home. She'd mentioned it before, casually, during her last visit, how her friend's mother had adjusted beautifully to assisted living, how it was really more like a community than an institution. I'd seen the brochures she'd left on the kitchen table, glossy pages full of smiling elderly people playing cards and doing watercolor paintings in supervised art rooms. "I'll stay in the shed," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else's throat. "Thank you," Megan said, her tone brightening immediately. "I really appreciate this, Mom. And listen, don't make a scene, okay? Stay out of sight during the party. I don't want you wandering around in your gardening clothes or whatever. This is a professional event. Image matters." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the wall I'd so carefully painted, feeling the house around me, my house, suddenly become foreign territory. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind picked up after midnight, rattling the windows, and I lay in bed listening to the ocean's rhythm change. I'd grown up in a fishing town 20 miles south of here, and I knew these waters the way some people know music. The Atlantic had moods. Tonight it sounded restless, muttering against the rocks below the house. I got up and made tea, standing in the kitchen in my nightgown, looking out at the dark mass of water beyond the glass. The house creaked around me, settling into its bones. When I was young, my father had worked on the boats, and my mother had kept the household accounts with an iron grip, making every dollar stretch. I'd learned from her how to be careful, how to save, how to plan. I'd put myself through college working 2 jobs, became a teacher, married a man who seemed steady and kind. We'd had Megan when I was 24. I'd thought I was building something solid, but my husband had left when Megan was in college, wiping out half our savings in the divorce. Megan had sided with him, said I'd been cold and controlling, that I'd driven him away. She'd stopped calling for months. When we finally rebuilt some semblance of a relationship, it was different, thinner, transactional. She called when she needed something: a loan for business school, help with her apartment deposit, a place to stay between leases, and now, this house. I'd thought that when I bought this place, when I finally had something that was truly mine, something no one could take or divide or claim half of, I'd feel safe. But standing in the kitchen that night, I realized I'd been wrong. Safety wasn't about ownership. It was about power, and I had none. The next morning, I walked down to the harbor. It was early, the sun barely up, the docks slick with overnight rain. A few fishermen were already at work, preparing their boats, their voices carrying across the water. I stopped at the end of the pier and stood watching the horizon. "Storm coming," a voice said beside me. I turned to see Andrew, one of the old-timers who kept a small boat moored nearby. He was 70 if he was a day, weathered and lean, with eyes that seemed permanently squinted from decades of staring into sun and spray. "When?" I asked. "Saturday, most likely. Big one." He nodded toward the southeast. "They're calling for high winds, heavy rain, and the tide's going to be exceptional. The moon's full and we're just past the autumn equinox. Water'll come right up into the lower buildings if it's bad enough." I looked back toward my house, visible in the distance, its front hall built on the old reclaimed lot that generations ago had been underwater at high tide. The original owners had reinforced it, added drainage, but on the worst storm days, I'd seen seawater seep under the front door, leaving a tide mark on the stone floor. "How high?" I asked. Andrew shrugged. "Hard to say, but if you've got anything valuable in the front rooms, I'd move it." I thanked him and walked back slowly, my mind working. Saturday, the day of Megan's party, the day she wanted me invisible, tucked away in the shed like an embarrassing piece of old furniture. By the time I reached the house, the idea had already taken root. I spent the next few days preparing, moving quietly through the rooms like a ghost in my own home. I carried my favorite paintings upstairs, wrapped in old sheets. I packed my important documents, deeds, insurance papers, photographs, into waterproof boxes and stored them in the attic. I locked the doors to the upper floor and pocketed the keys. I moved my grandmother's china, my books, everything that mattered, away from the front hall where Megan planned to hold her party. She arrived on Friday afternoon with a van full of rental equipment and 2 assistants who looked at the house with the calculating eyes of people staging a performance. Megan barely glanced at me. "The caterers will be here at 8 tomorrow morning," she said, directing her assistants to start unloading chairs. "The party starts at 2. I need you gone by noon, Mom. And remember what I said. Stay in the shed. Don't come out. If I see you wandering around, we're going to have problems." I nodded, mute, watching them transform my living room into an event space. They pushed my furniture against the walls, covered my floors with protective plastic, hung strings of lights across the ceiling. By evening, the house looked like a stage set, beautiful and impersonal. That night, I checked my phone one more time. The weather alert was clear. Severe storm warning. High winds, heavy rain, coastal flooding expected. Peak tide at 2:47 p.m., exactly when Megan's party would be in full swing. I packed a small bag, clothes, my phone, a thermos of coffee. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter where Megan would see it. Gone for a walk. Be back later. Saturday morning, I left before anyone arrived. I walked through the damp streets to the cafe 3 blocks away, the one with the big windows overlooking the harbor. I ordered coffee and sat down at a table where I could see my house in the distance. And then I waited. The sky was already darkening. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls. I sat by the window, my hands wrapped around a mug that had gone lukewarm an hour ago. Outside, the wind had begun to pick up, sending scraps of paper and plastic bags tumbling down the street. The sky had turned the color of old bruises, purple and gray, pressing down on the town like a hand. From where I sat, I could see my house clearly. Even from 3 blocks away, I could make out the white rental vans parked outside, the people moving back and forth carrying equipment. Megan would be there now, directing everything, making sure every detail was perfect. I imagined her in one of her expensive outfits, probably the green dress she'd worn to her last corporate dinner, her hair blown out straight, her makeup flawless. She'd always cared so much about appearances. The cafe owner, a woman named Rita who I'd come to know over the past few months, refilled my cup without asking. "You okay, Alice? You've been sitting here for hours." "Just watching the weather," I said. She glanced out the window and frowned. "It's going to be a bad one. They're saying it might be the worst tide we've had in 5 years. You should probably head home soon. Get everything battened down." I nodded, but didn't move. Rita lingered for a moment, then went back behind the counter. A few other customers had trickled in. Locals, mostly. People who knew what these storms could do. They ordered their coffee to go, checking their phones, talking about sandbags and generators. At 1:30, the rain started. It came suddenly, as if someone had torn open the sky. Within minutes, the street was slick and shining, water running in rivulets along the curbs. The wind drove the rain sideways, battering the cafe windows. I watched as people ran for cover, holding newspapers over their heads, splashing through puddles that were already forming. Through the rain, I could still see my house. The lights were on inside, glowing warm against the darkening afternoon. Cars had started arriving, parking along the street. I watched as guests hurried from their vehicles to the front door, their umbrellas turning inside out in the wind. They were dressed well. Suits, cocktail dresses, heels that would be ruined by the weather. Megan's important people, her clients and investors. At 2 o'clock, the party would be starting. I pictured the scene inside. Servers circulating with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Megan smiling her professional smile. Shaking hands, making small talk. The front hall would be full of people. The room I'd painted last spring, where I'd hung curtains I'd sewn myself. My space, temporarily colonized. The storm intensified. Thunder rolled in from the ocean, deep and resonant, and the rain became a roar against the cafe roof. The lights flickered once, twice. Rita came out from behind the counter and stood at the window beside me. "Jesus," she muttered. "Look at the harbor." I turned my attention to the water. The tide was coming in fast, pushed by the wind, the waves high and angry. The harbor, usually calm and protected, had turned into a churning gray mass. Spray flew up over the docks, and I could see the boats straining at their moorings, rocking violently. "The forecast said peak tide at 2:47, I said quietly. Rita looked at me. "That's in less than an hour. Alice, are you sure you should be—" "I'm fine here," I said. She hesitated, then nodded and went back to the counter. I checked my phone. The weather alert had been updated. Coastal flooding warning. Residents in low-lying areas advised to move to higher ground. Stay away from waterfront structures. My house sat at the lowest point of the street, right where the old warehouse district met the water. On a normal high tide, the ocean came within 20 feet of the front door. On a spring tide like this, with a storm pushing it higher, I took a sip of coffee and watched. At 2:30, I saw the first sign of trouble. Water had begun pooling in the street in front of my house. Not just rain, but seawater. dark and thick with debris. It spread slowly at first, a sheen across the pavement. But within minutes, it was deeper, ankle-high, then higher. The parked cars along the curb began to look like boats at anchor. Inside the house, the party continued. I could see shadows moving behind the windows, the shapes of people talking, laughing, unaware. Or perhaps they'd noticed the weather, but assumed they were safe inside. People always assumed that. They believed walls were enough. At 2:45, the sea came for them. It happened faster than I'd expected, even knowing what was coming. The water in the street suddenly surged, pushed by a massive wave I could see rolling in from the harbor. It hit the front of the house like a fist, a wall of dark water that smashed against the door and windows. For a moment, everything seemed to hold, and then the front door gave way. From where I sat, I couldn't hear the screams, but I could imagine them. I watched as the water poured into the house, flooding the front hall in seconds. The lights inside flickered wildly, casting crazy shadows. I could see people moving frantically, dark shapes running, stumbling. "Oh my God!" Rita said from behind me. Other customers had gathered at the window now, watching in horror. Someone said they should call 911. Someone else was already on their phone. I sat very still, my hands steady around my mug. The water kept coming. It poured through the front entrance, through the windows that the pressure had cracked, filling the hall that Megan had so carefully decorated. I thought about the rental chairs, the elaborate buffet table, the sound system that had probably cost thousands to rent. I thought about the white tablecloth I'd glimpsed yesterday, the crystal glasses, the ice sculptures shaped like dolphins that Megan's assistant had been so excited about, all of it drowning. People began emerging from the house, forcing their way through the front door against the current. They stumbled into the flooded street, soaked and desperate. I could see them clearly now. Men in ruined suits, women who'd lost their shoes, everyone drenched and wild-eyed. Some fell into the waist-deep water. Others clung to the porch railing, trying to help those still inside. And then I saw Megan. She came out like a fury, her green dress plastered to her body, her hair hanging in wet ropes around her face. Even from a distance, I could see that she was screaming, her mouth open wide, her arms gesturing wildly. She turned back toward the house, trying to go back in, but someone grabbed her, one of her assistants, I thought, and pulled her away. The water was still rising. It had reached the middle of the front hall's windows now, and through the glass I could see objects floating. Chairs, cushions, what looked like serving trays. The lights finally died, leaving the house dark except for the gray stormlight coming through the windows. More people emerged, a steady stream of soaked, shocked guests. They huddled together in the street, some making calls on their phones, others just standing there in the rain looking lost. A few tried to wade to their cars, but the water was too deep, the current too strong. They were trapped, at least temporarily, waiting for the tide to turn. Emergency vehicles began arriving. Fire trucks, police cars, their lights flashing red and blue through the rain. First responders in fluorescent vests started helping people out of the flooded area, guiding them to higher ground. Someone brought blankets. Someone else was taking names, checking for injuries. Through it all, Megan stood in the middle of the street, staring at the house. Even soaked and bedraggled, even with her perfect party destroyed, she looked furious rather than defeated. I knew that look. I'd seen it when she was a child, and something didn't go her way. A birthday party canceled because of weather, a toy she wanted that we couldn't afford. She'd never learned to accept circumstances beyond her control. She'd always needed someone to blame. The rain began to ease around 3:30. The worst of the storm had passed, moving north up the coast. The tide would start going out soon, draining the water from the street, from my house. But the damage was done. I finished my coffee, now completely cold, and stood up. My legs were stiff from sitting so long. Rita caught my arm as I gathered my bag. "Alice, where are you going? You can't go out there." "I'm going home," I said. "But the flooding, it's receding now. I'll be careful." She looked at me strangely, her eyes searching my face. "Did you know this was going to happen?" I met her gaze steadily. "I grew up here, Rita. I know these waters." I left before she could ask anything else. The street was a mess of debris and standing water. The emergency vehicles had cordoned off the worst areas, but I knew the back ways, the higher ground. I circled around, coming up behind my house through the narrow alley that ran between the buildings. As I approached, I could see the full extent of the disaster. The front hall was destroyed, windows cracked, door hanging off its hinges, water still draining out in dark streams. The street in front was littered with the wreckage of Megan's party. Overturned chairs, broken glass, sodden tablecloths, food scattered everywhere like the aftermath of some grotesque feast. And there, standing in the middle of it all, was my daughter. She saw me coming. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the flooded street, me dry and calm in my raincoat, her drenched and trembling with rage. Then she started toward me, splashing through the ankle-deep water that remained, her ruined heels abandoned somewhere behind her. "Where were you?" she screamed. "Why didn't you warn me?" I stopped at the edge of the water and looked at her. Really looked at her. Mascara ran down her cheeks in black streaks. Her expensive dress was ruined, covered in mud and seaweed. Her carefully styled hair hung limp and tangled. She looked nothing like the polished professional she'd wanted to present to her clients. She looked like someone the ocean had chewed up and spit out. "You told me to stay away," I said quietly. "You told me not to make a scene." Megan's face contorted with something between disbelief and pure rage. Water dripped from her chin, her clothes, forming a puddle around her bare feet. Behind her, the remaining guests were being herded away by emergency personnel, some wrapped in blankets, others still on their phones, presumably calling lawyers or insurance companies or whoever you called when a party turned into a disaster. "You knew," Megan said, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than a scream. "You knew this was going to happen." I adjusted the bag on my shoulder, feeling the weight of my thermos, my dry clothes, my phone with its weather alerts. "I checked the forecast. Anyone could have. But you didn't tell me." She took another step forward, and I saw one of the police officers glance our way. "You let me plan this entire event, bring all these people here, spend thousands of dollars on catering and rentals and—" Her voice cracked. "My clients were here, my investors. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "What I've done?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "Megan, I don't control the weather. I don't control the tides. I'm just an old woman who was told to stay in the shed and keep quiet." Her mouth opened and closed. A fire truck rolled past us, its lights painting her face red and blue in alternating waves. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. "This is my house now. After what you've done? The negligence? I'm going to make sure you never set foot in there again. I'll have you declared incompetent. This is my house," I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised even me. "My name is on the deed. I bought it with my money, and you asked to use it for a party. I said yes. What happened after that was an act of God, Megan. Or an act of the Atlantic Ocean, if you prefer." "You're insane." She was crying now, tears mixing with the rain and seawater on her face. "You did this on purpose. You wanted to ruin this for me. You've always—" She stopped, her chest heaving. "You've always resented my success. Ever since Dad left, you've been bitter and small, and you can't stand that I've built something for myself." The words should have hurt. A year ago, they would have. But standing there watching my daughter fall apart in the wreckage of her own arrogance, I felt nothing but a strange, cold clarity. "Go home, Megan," I said. "Get dry. Deal with your guests. I'll take care of the house. You can't just—" "I can." I pulled the keys from my pocket, the ones to the upper floor, the rooms she hadn't been able to access. "Everything that matters to me is safe. The damage is contained to the front hall, the space you were using. Your insurance, or the rental company's insurance, or whoever's insurance will cover it. But this is still my house, and you're no longer welcome in it." Her face went white beneath the smeared makeup. "You can't kick me out. I'm your daughter." "You told me to stay in the shed," I said quietly. "You threatened to put me in a nursing home if I embarrassed you. You treated my house like a venue and me like an inconvenient prop to be hidden away. So, no, Megan. You're not welcome here anymore." I turned and walked toward the back entrance. the one that led to the upper floors, the dry, safe part of the house where I'd moved everything that mattered. Behind me, I heard her sob, a raw sound that might have broken my heart if she hadn't already broken it so many times before. "Mom!" she called out. "Mom, please!" I didn't turn around. I unlocked the back door and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched as one of her assistants approached her, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, led her away toward the remaining vehicles. She looked back once, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. It was exactly as I'd left it. The cream-colored walls, the brass lamp, the bed with its quilt my grandmother had made 60 years ago. I sat down on the edge of the mattress and realized my hands were shaking. It took 3 days for the water to fully recede and for the cleanup to begin. I hired a restoration company myself, paying with my credit card, watching as they tore out the damaged drywall in the front hall, ripped up the ruined flooring, set up industrial fans to dry everything out. The rental company came for their destroyed equipment. The caterer sent me a bill that I returned with a note. "Contact Megan Thorne." This was her event. Megan called 17 times in those 3 days. I didn't answer. She sent texts that progressed from angry to pleading to threatening. I read them all and responded to none. On the 4th day, she showed up at the house. I was in the garden when I heard the car pull up. I'd been planting bulbs, tulips and daffodils that would come up in the spring, long after this winter had passed. My hands were deep in the soil, the earth cold and dark under my fingernails. I heard her footsteps on the gravel path and didn't look up. "We need to talk," Megan said. I pressed another bulb into the ground, covered it with soil, patted it down gently. "Dewey, Mom, please. I'm sorry about what I said. I was upset. The party was important to me, and when it all fell apart..." She paused. "I shouldn't have blamed you." I moved to the next spot I'd marked, dug another hole. The rhythm of it was soothing. Dig, place, cover, pat. Simple. Productive. "I spoke to my therapist," Megan continued. "She said I might have some unresolved anger about Dad leaving, that I might be projecting onto you." "Might be," I repeated, still not looking at her. "And I know I was harsh about the nursing home thing. I didn't mean it. I was just frustrated that you were being difficult about the house." I sat back on my heels and finally looked up at her. She'd clearly prepared for this visit. Her hair was done, her makeup perfect, her clothes expensive and unstained. She looked like the daughter I'd raised, the one who always knew how to present herself, how to say the right things to get what she wanted. "What do you want, Megan?" She blinked, taken aback by the directness. "I want us to move past this. I want to repair our relationship." "Why?" "Because you're my mother." "Am I?" I stood up, brushing the dirt from my knees. "Or am I just someone useful to have around when you need something? A house for a party? A loan for business school? Someone to blame when your father decided he preferred his 25-year-old hygienist? That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, and it came out bitter. "You want to talk about fair? I raised you alone after your father left. I worked 2 jobs to keep you in private school. I paid for your college, your graduate school, your first apartment deposit. And when I finally bought something for myself, a small house where I could spend my last years in peace, you demanded to use it and then threatened to have me institutionalized when I hesitated. I said I was sorry. You said the words. I picked up my gardening tools, starting toward the shed, the real shed, the storage building where everything had its place. But you didn't mean them. You're here because you want something. You always want something." She followed me. "That's not true. I love you." I stopped at the shed door and turned to face her. "Do you? Or do you love the idea of having a mother? Someone to perform the role when it's convenient, to disappear when it's not?" Her eyes filled with tears. They looked real this time. Not the angry tears from the other day, but something deeper. For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. "I know I haven't been the best daughter," she said quietly. "I know I've taken you for granted, but I want to do better. Let me try." "How?" I asked. "How exactly do you want to do better?" She hesitated. "I could visit more often, call more. Maybe we could have dinner once a week. And the nursing home threats? The demands to use my house? The expectation that I'll hide away whenever my existence is inconvenient? That won't happen again. Won't it? I studied her face, looking for something genuine, something that went beyond the performance. Because from where I'm standing, Megan, this feels like another negotiation. You need something. Maybe you need to salvage your reputation after the party disaster. Maybe you need to feel like a good daughter for your therapist. And you're saying whatever you think will get you what you want. That's cruel. It's honest. I opened the shed door and began organizing my tools, hanging them on their designated hooks. I'm 66 years old. I spent most of my life trying to be what other people needed. A good wife, even when my husband was cheating. A good mother, even when my daughter blamed me for things I couldn't control. A good teacher, even when the school system was falling apart around me. And you know what I learned? She didn't answer. I learned that being good doesn't protect you. Being accommodating doesn't earn you respect. It just teaches people that you'll accept whatever they decide to give you. I turned back to face her. I'm done accepting scraps, Megan. I'm done being grateful for the bare minimum of consideration. So, what are you saying? You're cutting me out of your life? I'm saying that if you want to be in my life, it needs to be on different terms. Real terms. Not phone calls when you need something. Not apologies designed to manipulate. Actual change. I can change. Then prove it. I walked past her, back toward the house. But prove it somewhere else. I need space right now. And you need to figure out who you actually are when you're not performing for someone. Mom, go home, Megan. This time she didn't follow. I heard her car start a few minutes later, heard the crunch of gravel as she backed out of the driveway. I stood at the kitchen window and watched her go, her taillights disappearing down the street. The house felt very quiet after she left. Not empty, just quiet. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the ocean. The water was calm now, innocent, as if it hadn't raged through my front hall just days before. The restoration work took 2 weeks. I watched as strangers moved through my house, repairing what the ocean had damaged, replacing what couldn't be saved. They were efficient and professional, barely speaking to me beyond the necessary questions about tile choices and paint colors. I preferred it that way. The silence felt cleaner than the complicated conversations I'd been having with Megan in my head, the arguments I won and lost over and over in the space between sleeping and waking. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the storm, I was sitting on the back steps drinking coffee when I heard someone call my name. I looked up to see Andrew, the old fisherman from the pier, standing at the edge of my property with a paper bag in his hands. "Brought you something," he said, holding up the bag. "Fresh mackerel. Caught them this morning." I stood and walked over, brushing cat hair off my sweater. A stray had started coming around, a lean orange tom with a notched ear. I'd been feeding him, though I told myself I wasn't keeping him. "You didn't have to do that," I said. Andrew shrugged. "Had extra. Figured you might appreciate it." He glanced toward the house, where the restoration crew's van was still parked. "Heard about the flooding. Heard about your daughter's party, too. Town's been talking." I felt heat rise to my face. "I'm sure they have. Don't be embarrassed." He handed me the bag, and I could feel the weight of the fish through the paper, smell the salt and cold. "Most folks are saying you handled it just right. Megan's got a reputation around here for being—" He paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Particular. She's ambitious," I said, which was true even if it wasn't complete. "She's a piece of work," Andrew said bluntly. "Always has been. Even when she was young, coming here summers, she treated this town like it was beneath her." He scratched his chin. "You, though, you're different. You actually see this place." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "Anyway," he continued, "reason I came by wasn't just the fish. My granddaughter's coming to stay with me for a while. She's having a rough time. Dropped out of college, broke up with her boyfriend, doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. She's 22 and lost as hell." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be sorry. Be helpful." He smiled, and I saw the gap where he'd lost a tooth years ago to a fishing line accident. "She needs work. Something to do with her hands while she figures things out. I thought maybe you could use some help around here. Garden work, house repairs. Whatever you need. She's strong, good worker when she's motivated. I'd pay her wage myself, but I figured having a job might do her more good than my charity. I looked back at the house, at the garden that had gotten wild while I'd been dealing with everything else, at the shed that needed organizing, the gutters that probably needed cleaning before winter. I can't pay much, I said. Doesn't need to be much. She's staying with me, eating my food. She just needs something to give her day structure, purpose. He met my eyes. And maybe she needs to be around someone who's figured out how to stand up for herself. That last part struck something in me. Bring her by tomorrow, I said. We'll see if it works. Her name was Iris, and she arrived the next morning in ripped jeans and a flannel shirt that looked like it had been through a war. Her hair was dyed an unnatural black with purple streaks, pulled back in a messy bun. She had 3 piercings in one ear, 2 in the other, and a tattoo of a compass on her inner wrist. She looked nothing like Megan at that age, when my daughter had been all pearls and perfect posture. Grandpa said you need help, Iris said, her voice flat and tired. I do, I replied. Come in. I'll make coffee and we can talk about what needs doing. She followed me inside, her eyes taking in the house. The front hall was still being finished. New drywall up, but not yet painted. The floor bare concrete waiting for tile. The rest of the house was intact, warm and comfortable in the morning light. This place is cool, Iris said, and I heard the surprise in her voice, as if she'd expected something different. My grandfather said it used to be a fishing warehouse. In the 1800s, I said, leading her to the kitchen. They stored equipment here, processed some of the catch. The upper floors were added later, in the 20s, when they started converting these buildings into homes. I made coffee while Iris sat at the kitchen table, her fingers drumming a restless pattern on the wood. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the thinness of her wrists. She looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping or eating well. So, what happened? I asked, setting a mug in front of her. Your grandfather said you left school. She wrapped her hands around the mug, but didn't drink. I was studying engineering. Everyone said it was a smart choice. Good money, stable career, all that. But I hated it. Hated the classes, hated the people, hated sitting in lectures about load-bearing structures when all I could think about was how much I wanted to be anywhere else. So you left. So I failed out. She finally looked up at me, her eyes defiant. I stopped going to class, stopped doing the work. They gave me a semester to get my act together and I didn't, so they kicked me out. My parents are furious. My mom keeps sending me brochures for community colleges and trade schools. My dad won't talk to me at all. What do you want to do? I asked. She blinked. What? What do you actually want to do with your life? I don't know. The defiance crumbled a little, showing something more vulnerable underneath. I thought I wanted to build things, design things. But engineering wasn't that. It was all theory and math and computer programs. I want to work with my hands, make something real. I sipped my coffee, thinking. My garden needs work, I said finally. The shed needs organizing. The gutters need cleaning, and there's a fence out back that's falling apart. None of it's glamorous, but it's real work, things you can see when you're done. I can do that, Iris said quickly. It won't solve anything, I warned her. It won't tell you what to do with the rest of your life, but maybe it'll give you space to think. And maybe learning to finish something will help you figure out what's worth starting. She nodded slowly. My grandfather said you just went through something. With your daughter. He talks too much. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. He said you didn't let her push you around, that you stood up for yourself even though everyone expected you to just take it. It's not as simple as that, I said. It never is. She finally took a sip of her coffee. But you still did it. That's something. We started that afternoon. I showed Iris the garden, pointing out what needed to be done, weeding the beds, cutting back the dead growth, preparing the soil for winter. She worked quietly at first, her movements awkward, but she didn't complain. When she didn't know how to do something, she asked. When she made a mistake, she fixed it. Over the next week, a routine developed. Iris arrived each morning around 8, and we worked until lunch. I made sandwiches and soup, and we ate together in the kitchen, not talking much but comfortable in the silence. In the afternoons, she tackled bigger projects, repairing the fence, organizing the shed, hauling away debris. I worked alongside her when my knees allowed, directed from the porch when they didn't. She didn't ask about Megan, and I didn't ask about her parents. We existed in a present tense that didn't require explanations or justifications. It was surprisingly peaceful. On the 8th day, while we were painting the front hall, the restoration company had finished the structural work, but I'd decided to do the painting myself. Iris said, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you regret it? Standing up to your daughter the way you did?" I dipped my brush in the paint, considering. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it had to happen. I regret that our relationship deteriorated to the point where it was necessary. But the actual act of setting boundaries? No, I don't regret that. Even if she never comes back? Even then." I painted a long, smooth stroke along the wall, because the alternative was losing myself completely, and I'd already spent too many years doing that. Iris was quiet for a while, working on her section of wall. Then she said, "My mom keeps calling, telling me I'm throwing my life away, that I'm being selfish and irresponsible. Are you? Maybe?" She laughed, but it sounded sad. "I don't know. I just know that going back to engineering, pretending everything's fine, forcing myself through a degree I don't want, that feels like dying. Slowly, in a very practical, well-paid way." "Then don't do it," I said. "But what if I end up with nothing? What if I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do?" I set down my brush and turned to face her. "Iris, you're 22 years old. You're supposed to not have everything figured out. That's not failure. That's being young. The mistake isn't dropping out of a program that was wrong for you. The mistake would be spending the next 40 years committed to that wrong choice because you were afraid of disappointing people." "Your daughter probably thinks you're wrong," Iris said. "About what you did?" "Probably. Does that bother you?" I picked up my brush again. "It used to. When she was young, I needed her to understand my choices, to validate them. But I'm 66 years old, Iris. I don't have time anymore to wait for other people's approval before I live my life." We painted in silence for a while. The orange cat appeared in the doorway, meowing for food. Iris smiled and went to feed him, and I watched as she crouched down, murmuring to the animal, scratching behind his notched ear. "Are you keeping him?" she asked. "I don't know yet." "You should. He's already keeping you." That evening, after Iris left, I sat on the back steps with a glass of wine and watched the sun set over the ocean. The cat, I'd started thinking of him as Rusty, curled up beside me, purring. The house behind me was slowly becoming whole again, patched and painted, weathering its wounds. I thought about what Andrew had said, about seeing this place rather than just using it, about Iris, learning to finish things, about myself, learning to start over. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. "Can we please talk?" I looked at it for a long time. Then I set the phone face down on the steps and watched the light fade over the water. Not yet, I thought. Maybe not ever, but not yet. October turned into November, and the air took on that sharp metallic quality that comes before the first real cold. The garden had been put to bed for winter. Bulbs planted, dead growth cleared, the soil covered with mulch. Iris and I had repainted the front hall a soft gray blue, the color of the ocean on calm days. The house felt complete again, but different. Better, somehow. More honestly mine. Iris had started staying later, sometimes through dinner. She'd begun bringing her sketchbook, filling pages with drawings of boats and buildings and shoreline structures. Her lines were confident, precise in a way that surprised me. "You're good at this," I said one evening, looking over her shoulder as she sketched the view from my kitchen window. She shrugged but looked pleased. "It's just doodling." "It's not." I studied the drawing, the way she'd captured the curve of the harbor, the weathered texture of the dock posts. "Have you ever thought about architecture? Actual building design, not engineering?" That's what my ex-boyfriend, said. But my parents wanted something more practical, something with a clear career path. She added shading to the water, making it look dimensional. Engineering was the compromise. Some compromises cost too much. She looked up at me. Is that what happened with your daughter? You compromised too much? I sat down across from her, cradling my tea mug. For a long time, yes. I thought that's what mothers did. Absorbed the impact, smoothed things over, made everything work even when it cost us everything. I thought that was love. And now? Now I think love without respect is just servitude with a prettier name. Iris went back to her drawing, quiet for a moment. Then she said, My mom came by my grandfather's house yesterday. She brought more college brochures. Got into a fight with him when he told her to leave me alone. How do you feel about that? Guilty, grateful, angry. She set down her pencil. All of it at once. I hate that they're fighting because of me. But I'm also tired of being told what I should want. What do you want? She laughed, but it sounded frustrated. I keep asking myself that. What I know is that I like working with my hands. I like seeing something take shape. I like the work we've been doing here. It feels real in a way school never did. Then maybe that's enough for now, I said. Knowing what feels real. Before she could respond, headlights swept across the window. We both turned to look. A car had pulled into my driveway. A silver sedan I recognized immediately. Is that your daughter? Iris asked. Yes. I stood up, my stomach tightening. You should probably go. Do you want me to stay? I almost said yes, but this was something I needed to face alone. Thank you, but no. Go home. I'll see you tomorrow. Iris gathered her things quickly, slipping out the back door just as Megan knocked on the front. I took a breath, steadied myself, and opened it. Megan looked different than she had 3 weeks ago. Thinner, maybe, or just more worn. Her clothes were still expensive, her makeup still perfect. But there was something fragile in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked into the front hall, the hall she'd tried to commandeer, the hall the ocean had destroyed, and stopped, looking around at the fresh paint, the new floor tiles I'd chosen, the artwork I'd hung on the walls. It looks good, she said quietly. Different, but good. What do you want, Megan? She turned to face me. I wanted to see you, to talk. You haven't answered any of my calls or texts. No, I haven't. Why not? I walked past her into the living room and sat down. She followed, perching on the edge of the sofa like she wasn't sure she was allowed to fully settle. Because I didn't want to, I said simply. Because I needed space. Because every time we talk, it ends the same way. You wanting something, me giving it, you taking it for granted until you want something else. That's not fair, isn't it? I looked at her directly. Tell me the last time you called just to talk. Not to ask for something, not because you needed something, just to see how I was doing. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see her searching her memory, and the silence stretched between us, growing heavier. That's what I thought, I said. I'm here now, she said, and her voice cracked slightly. I'm trying, Mom. I know I've been a terrible daughter. I know I've taken advantage of you. But I want to fix this. I want us to have a real relationship. Why? Because you're my mother. That's not a reason, Megan. That's a biological fact. Why do you actually want a relationship with me? What do I give you besides free real estate and emotional labor? She flinched. That's cruel. It's honest. And I'm tired of pretending that our relationship is something it isn't. You don't call on my birthday. You didn't come when I moved into this house. You've never asked about my life, my interests, how I'm actually doing. You show up when you need something and disappear when you don't. I've been busy building my career. We're all busy, Megan. That's not an excuse. It's a choice. You chose your career over maintaining a relationship with me. That's fine. That's your right. But you don't get to come back now, when it's convenient for you, and demand that I pretend the last 5 years didn't happen. She was crying now, tears sliding down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. The party was a disaster. Everyone saw. My clients, my investors, they all saw me lose control, saw the chaos. Half of them think I'm incompetent for not checking the weather. The other half think it's funny. I've become a joke. I'm sorry that happened, I said, and I meant it. But it's not my fault. You chose to have the party here. You chose not to check the forecast. You chose to prioritize appearance over substance. Those were your choices, and you're living with the consequences. But you knew. Her voice rose. You knew the storm was coming and you didn't warn me. You told me to stay away. You told me not to make a scene. I did exactly what you asked. She stopped, her hands clenched in her lap. You're being intentionally obtuse. You know what I meant. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're angry that I took you at your word. You wanted me invisible and silent, and that's what you got. You just don't like that the consequences fell on you instead of me. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the ocean was dark, barely visible under the clouded moon. You're punishing me, she said. No, I'm protecting myself. From what? I'm your daughter. I'm not some threat. You threatened to put me in a nursing home, I said quietly. You called my house a shed and told me to hide there like I was something shameful. You've spent years treating me like an inconvenience, and now you're angry that I'm not willing to pretend that's okay. She turned back to me, her face blotchy and red. I said I was sorry. You said words. But nothing's changed, has it? You're still centering yourself, still making this about your feelings, your reputation, your needs. You haven't once asked how I felt when you threatened me. You haven't acknowledged the years of taking me for granted. You want forgiveness without actually changing anything. What do you want me to do? She sounded desperate now. Tell me what you want and I'll do it. I want you to go home, I said. I want you to actually think about what kind of daughter you want to be. Not what sounds good, not what your therapist told you to say, but what you're genuinely willing to commit to. And then, if you decide you actually want a relationship with me, a real one, with effort and reciprocity and respect, you can reach out, but not before. How long? I don't know, as long as it takes. That's not fair. You're asking me to prove myself without telling me how. Life isn't fair, Megan. You taught me that when you blamed me for your father leaving. When you sided with him even though he was the one who cheated. When you spent years punishing me for things I didn't do. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. I'm 66 years old. I don't have time to manage your emotional growth. That's your job now. She stared at me for a long moment. I could see so many emotions crossing her face. Anger, hurt, confusion, something that might have been respect. Finally, she grabbed her purse and walked to the door. You've changed, she said. Yes. I don't know if I like it. You don't have to. I opened the door for her. But you do have to accept it. She left without another word. I watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the darkness. Then I closed the door, locked it, and stood in the quiet of my house. Rusty appeared from wherever he'd been hiding during the confrontation and wound around my ankles, purring. I picked him up. He was getting heavier, filling out from regular meals, and carried him to the kitchen. My hands were shaking again, the way they had after the storm, after the first confrontation. But underneath the shaking was something else, something solid. My phone buzzed, a text from Iris. You okay? Saw your daughter leave. I typed back. I'm okay. See you tomorrow. She responded immediately. Want me to bring coffee and donuts? The good ones from the bakery? I smiled. Yes. Thank you. Another buzz. This one from Andrew. Iris says you had a rough night. Come by the boat tomorrow if you want. Going out for cod. Could use the company. I hadn't been out on a fishing boat in 40 years. The idea filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. What time? I typed. 5 a.m. Bring warm clothes and coffee. I set the phone down and looked around my kitchen. The sketchbook Iris had left behind was still on the table, open to her drawing of the harbor, the mug I'd drunk tea from, the chair I'd sat in while talking to Megan, the window that looked out onto the dark ocean. This was my life now. Not the life I'd planned when I was young and thought I understood how things worked. Not the life I'd built with my husband, or the life I'd tried to maintain with my daughter. This was something new, still taking shape, still figuring itself out. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what that meant. The fishing boat rocked gently in the pre-dawn darkness, the engine humming beneath my feet. Andrew stood at the wheel, his silhouette barely visible against the lighter gray of the eastern horizon. I held my coffee with both hands, feeling the cold seep through my gloves, breathing in the smell of salt and diesel and fish. "Forgot how much I missed this," I said. Andrew glanced back at me and smiled. "The ocean gets in your blood. You can leave it, but it doesn't leave you." We headed out past the harbor, past the breakwater where the gulls were already gathering, out into the open water where the swells grew larger and the land became a dark line behind us. I'd woken at 4, nervous about being back on a boat after so many years. But as soon as we'd cast off, something in me had settled. This was where I'd grown up. These waters had shaped me before marriage and motherhood and disappointment had tried to reshape me into something else. "Iris is doing well," Andrew said as he cut the engine and began preparing the lines. "She seems different, more focused." "She's figuring things out," I said, moving to help him. My hands remembered the motions, baiting hooks, checking lines, the careful dance of working on a moving deck. "So are you, seems like." I didn't answer right away. We fished in comfortable silence as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The cod were biting well, and soon we had a decent catch in the cooler. "My daughter came by last night," I said finally. "I heard. Iris was worried about you." "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually." I reeled in another fish, a good-sized cod that fought hard before I brought it up. I told Megan the truth, all of it. No softening, no apologizing for my feelings. Just the truth. How'd she take it? Not well, but that's not my problem anymore. I unhooked the fish and added it to the cooler. I spent too many years making her feelings my responsibility. I'm done with that. Andrew nodded slowly. My daughter, Iris's mother. She's cut from similar cloth, always wanting things to be a certain way, getting angry when life doesn't cooperate. She's furious at me right now for not forcing Iris back to school. You can't force someone to live a life they don't want. No. But you can love them anyway, even when they disappoint you. He cast his line again. The trick is knowing the difference between love and control. Took me too long to learn that. We fished until mid-morning, then headed back with our catch. Andrew gave me half the fish, refusing payment, and I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Lightness. As if I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Iris was waiting at my house when I arrived, sitting on the back steps with Rusty in her lap. She stood when she saw me, her face anxious. "I was worried," she said. "You weren't answering your phone." "I was out on the water. No service." I held up the bag of fish. "Want to help me clean these? I'll teach you." Her face brightened. "Really?" We spent the afternoon at the outdoor sink, and I showed her how to scale and gut the cod, how to fillet them properly, how to save the bones for stock. She was clumsy at first, squeamish about the blood and guts, but she kept at it. By the third fish, her cuts were cleaner, more confident. "My mom called again this morning," Iris said, not looking up from her work. "She said I need to make a decision. Either go back to school or get a real job. She's tired of me playing around." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd think about it." She set down her knife. "Alice, can I ask you something? How did you know when it was time to stop trying with your daughter?" I considered the question, watching the gulls circle overhead. I don't know if it was one moment. It was more like, I realized I was exhausted. Not physically exhausted, but soul-deep tired. Tired of explaining myself, justifying my existence, trying to earn basic respect from someone who should have given it freely. And I realized that being tired like that wasn't love. It was something else. Something that was killing me slowly. Are you happier now? Without her? I'm not without her. The door isn't locked. But yes, I'm happier with boundaries. With honesty. With a life that's actually mine instead of one that's constantly being negotiated away. I rinsed my hands and looked at her. "What do you want, Iris? Not what your mother wants. Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want?" She was quiet for a long time, finishing the last fish, washing her hands, drying them on the towel. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but certain. "I want to learn carpentry. Maybe cabinet making. I want to work with wood, build things that last. I know it's not practical. I know it's not what my parents sacrificed for, but it's the only thing that feels right when I think about it. Then do it. Just like that? Just like that. I started packing the fillets into containers. Life's too short to spend it doing things that make you miserable just because other people think you should. Trust me. I spent 40 years learning that lesson. Don't waste your 20s repeating my mistakes. She helped me carry the fish inside. We were cooking dinner together, pan-fried cod with lemon and herbs, when someone knocked on the door. Iris and I exchanged glances. "If it's my daughter, you don't have to leave this time," I said. But it wasn't Megan. It was a young woman I didn't recognize, maybe 30, with a professional but nervous demeanor. "Ms. Thorne?" she asked. "Alice Thorne?" "Yes?" "I'm Jennifer Watts. I'm a reporter with the Cedar Point Gazette. I'm doing a story about the storm damage along the waterfront, and I heard about what happened at your house during your daughter's party. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions." My stomach sank. "I don't think it won't take long. Just a few details about the flooding, the damage, how the community's recovering." She smiled hopefully. Human interest angle. People love stories about coastal resilience. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not interested. I understand you might be concerned about your daughter's reputation, but this isn't about my daughter. This is about my privacy. What happened here was private, and I'm not turning it into entertainment for your readers." Jennifer's smile faltered. "Ms. Thorne, I really think this could be a positive story. The way you've rebuilt, the restoration work, it could inspire other people dealing with storm damage. Then write about someone else." I started to close the door. "Your daughter's already spoken to me," Jennifer said quickly. "She gave her version of events. I thought you might want to give yours." I stopped. "What did she say?" "That you knew about the storm and didn't warn her. That you deliberately let her party be destroyed because you were angry about—" She checked her notes. "Being asked to stay in the guest house during the event. The shed. Megan had called it the guest house. Of course she had." I felt Iris come up behind me, her presence supportive. I took a breath. "This is what you're going to write," I said. "Alice Thorne's home sustained water damage during the October storm. She has completed repairs and is grateful to the restoration companies who helped. That's all. No party, no daughter, no conflict. Just facts about the storm and the recovery. But the party is the interesting part. The party is my daughter's business, not yours or mine. If she wants to talk about it, that's her choice. But I won't be contributing to a story designed to humiliate her or me." Jennifer looked frustrated. "So you're protecting her? Even after what she did?" "I'm protecting myself," I said, "from being turned into a character in someone else's drama. Now please leave my property." She left, though I could tell she wasn't happy about it. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. "You could have told your side," Iris said quietly. "Made her look bad." I could have. But that's not who I want to be. I don't need revenge. I just need peace. We finished making dinner and ate on the back porch, watching the sunset. Rusty curled up between us, purring. The ocean was calm, reflecting the orange and pink of the sky. "I'm going to tell my mom," Iris said suddenly. "About the carpentry. About what I really want." "Good. She's going to be angry. Probably. But that's her problem, not yours. You can't live your life trying to avoid other people's anger. I learned that too late. You're learning it early. That's a gift." She smiled, and in the fading light she looked younger, less burdened. "Thank you, Alice, for everything. For the work, for the talks, for just seeing me. Thank you for seeing me too." We sat in comfortable silence until the stars came out. Eventually Iris left, and I was alone with Rusty and the sound of the waves. I thought about Megan, about the reporter, about all the ways this story could have gone differently. But this was the ending I'd chosen. Not dramatic, not vengeful, just quietly firm. My phone buzzed. Another text from Megan. "The reporter said you wouldn't comment. Thank you for that." I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a real acknowledgement of what had happened between us. But it was something. A small recognition that I'd chosen kindness even when I didn't have to. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. but I saved the message instead of deleting it. The next morning, I woke early and walked down to the beach. The tide was out, exposing the rocks and tidal pools, the sand smooth and unmarked. I took off my shoes and walked along the waterline, feeling the cold Atlantic soak into my feet. This was my life now. A small house by the sea. A job teaching Iris carpentry basics that I barely remembered myself, but was relearning alongside her. A friendship with Andrew and his rough wisdom. A cat who'd chosen me. Boundaries that I defended without apology. Peace that I'd built from the wreckage of other people's expectations. It wasn't the life I'd imagined at 20, or even at 60. It was smaller in some ways. Quieter, less populated, more careful. But it was mine. Every inch of it. Every choice and consequence and morning walk along the shore. In the distance, I could see Andrew's boat heading out for the day's fishing. A few other early risers were walking their dogs, collecting shells, standing in the shallow water. Normal people living normal lives, carrying their own private stories of loss and rebuilding. I stood there for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, feeling its weak November warmth on my face. Then I turned and walked back toward my house, ready for whatever came next. The ocean had taught me many things in 66 years. But the most important lesson was this: you cannot control the tides. You can only learn to read them, respect them, and build your life on ground high enough to weather the storms. I had finally learned to build on higher ground, and I was, for the first time in years, genuinely happy. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.